Like I mentioned, we look forward to an insightful discussion, and let's reflect on not just what the film has shown us, but also let's talk about the different challenges that we as a society face today. And yes, the question that keep on resonating, that is about our identity. So without further ado, I would like to ask this first question to Wanphrang. Wanphrang, I am curious and I'm eager to ask you this question. When you came up with this idea of, the Khasi Identity Trilogy, how can you say this with your first film, that is Where the Clouds End, and because we did not choose, it was premiered in 2015 and 2017. How did you tie up, to come to a culmination with this third film?
That's a very important question. I started with Where the Clouds End in 2015, which was addressing themes of the idea of purity, and fascinatingly enough, the personal is always political, And I encountered these photographs of my great-grandfather, who was from present-day Bangladesh, And it struck upon me that, because my father's side of the family subscribed to the Khasi religion, God bless his soul, my uncle and God quite Warble, my father, they were both office bearers at Saint Khasi, And it sort of made me wonder and think, whether this person who was from present-day Bangladesh, what was his religious identity? He came to live in Shillong, and I wondered, did it make him a Khasi because he spoke in Khasi, because he got married into a Khasi household? I didn't approach the subject matter from this position of dismissing it. I was willing to understand these things, and keep in mind that we were a generation which was prohibited or shunned from asking questions. But I think there was something in me that stirred that curiosity in me to find out more and more about who I was, where I come from. And I also decided to speak to the so-called custodians of Khasi cultural and political identity, ranging from different student organizations, heads of religious organizations, to get an understanding of what it means for them to be a Khasi, But at the same time, those questions didn't have very definitive answers, and sometimes questions don't need to have definitive answers. It's important that we just perpetually keep asking questions, as opposed to just accepting things because someone has said it to you. And at the same time, it was also a fascinating time because that whole inner-line permit conversation was happening, and I was like, who is this outsider? How long does a person have to live here to be, an insider? The Khasi community predates the idea of nation states. We're a transnational community. So what about those people who are living on the other side of the border? Does that make them Khasi first or Indian first, or do they have certain rights, etc., etc.? I enjoyed the fact that I was able to ask these difficult questions because these difficult questions were not asked before. When the First World War happened, and I'm now segueing into the because we did not choose film for the First World War, but I really enjoyed working on Because We Did Not Choose, because it was the first time ever, apart from, of course, Larsing Khongwir, and then, of course, apart from, just Larsing Khongwir, forgive me. Apart from Larsing Khongwir, the first time that people from my community, Khasi Identity and Garu, stepped out in huge numbers to go elsewhere was during the First World War. Approximately about 2,000 plus people were being taken to the theaters of war by Welsh missionaries. And they arrived there, and then they suddenly realized, oh my God, this is the antithesis of what it means to be civilized. For example, when they wanted to recruit people for the war, the Bishop of London in 1915, and I paraphrase his sermon, he says, to kill the Germans and to kill them to kill them so that we can save the world. So you can see, like, till today, like this fear mongering works really well in terms of recruiting vulnerable young people to do terrible things for you, you know. And these, I say kids because a lot of the laborers who went from the Khasi Identity Hills were in their 15, 16, 17. There was that joy and that excitement of seeing new lands. But when they went there, and they suddenly realized, wow, all right, like literally Jesus Christ, you know, they were so disheartened. But what it meant was that upon the return, a certain kind of literature, a certain kind of thought process started to kick in, you know. And one of a very significant individual was the Reverend Shai Rabot Manners, who started questioning the functionings of the British government. Why is it that you're taxing us so much, you know? And also, it also introduced a certain kind of vocabulary. Certain words were being had to be invented. For example, when they saw dolphins, they didn't have the word for dolphins. So this new kind of vocabulary started entering the lexicon of the Khasi language, you know. Every so often, you know, there was also this constant almost urging the Khasi people to abstain from alcohol, you know. So you'll see Nonglam Kristan things like "Lada piku aban job ik Jerman ngidi ban job shay jing dikyat," which is part of this whole temperance movement. And so till today, that tradition of temperance movement still occurs because on Sunday ki khang ki dukan kyat, you know. And then the other day, interestingly enough, you know, it just dawned upon me. You know, I also have an uncle who's quite a devout Presbyterian, and you know, he would every opportunity he would take it upon himself to pray for us. You know, so I grew up in a very interesting household where one side was very Khasi and the other side was extremely Presbyterian. And when you're young and you're trying to understand the idea of divine at that age, you're like, you know. So, and then needless to say, I remember when I first danced at that Shat Sukman Sim, it was I was class 4, maybe 10 or 12, no, maybe 10, whatever. And those days, like, you know, the Dudashan used to cover, you know. So I was scared to tell my mother's side of the family that I was going to go for a dance, you know. And they didn't know about it until bloody Dudashan played it on TV. And they saw, and it was this pan shot, tilt shot from the head, sorry, from the bottom till the face. It was like, great, okay, what are they going to say now, you know? Anyways, cut to, God bless my father. Then cut to, like, you know,
no, but what are you now? No, what are you now?
I'm still searching. You know, and it's the best place to be because I'm not arrogant to say I understand everything compact, you know. And I like to trouble people's thoughts because otherwise you take for granted that you know everything and you try to impose it upon people, you know. See, I lost my train of thought. Okay, dance, and then yes, and of course after that, you know, my father's side of the family took it upon themselves to tell me that Santa Claus doesn't exist. so for all of you who still believe in Santa Claus, you know, he doesn't exist, yeah? So this is the context as to why I really wanted to make films and question these things. And then, of course, you know, these were troubling thoughts, but I chose to channelize all of that confusion, that anger towards creating art and films that are rooted in empathy and make people want to come together as opposed to further polarizing them. So finally, the last film, this film is my creative treatment of an understanding of the reality of where we find ourselves in. It is not the position of the Yin Sat. So that's, yeah.
Okay. I will be asking a few more questions to you regarding the challenges you face when you had to do a research and film this film, because we know that it has to do a lot about the rites and the rituals in religion, and they are sensitive topics. So I'll come to Pastor. Pastor, we know that not just in our country, but even in our state, there is a lot of intolerance. How do you see the Khasi society evolving over the years?
Thank you, Iban, and also I would like to congratulate Comrade Wanphrang. He's a friend, and also, of course, the criticisms I will do when we move out of this hall. No. It was a successful screening. But before I come to your question, I may not be able to say later on. See, there is no Hima Khyrim without Kapomblang, and there is no Pomblang without Hima Khyrim. Well, as per the records that I'm access to, which I've read, which also Wanphrang had mentioned, especially the Nongelam Kristan, I would say that especially during the reign of Dakhor Singh, Hima Khyrim is very inclusive in character. There was a Christian organization, of course, patronized by the Methodist Church, called the Jingyaseng Ba Hima Khyrim. And there was also another subgroup among the Methodists within the Hima Khyrim called Jingyaseng Maushai Laisnat. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 1914, they had a big gathering where they presented Dakhor Singh with the Bible. And in 1915, Gajay Singh Ba Hima Khyrim, Dakhor Singh was presented during the service, and he spoke more than a pastor. And he also contributed to the fund called Kasinyang Hima Khyrim for the improvement and the betterment of schools within the Hima Khyrim. At that point of time, the number of Methodist Christians under the Hima Khyrim, they were less than 2,000, which means Hima Khyrim, you can use this terminology, from Kharar Blang, Khapot, Bangladesh, I mean the Kharar Blang bordering Bangladesh, to Sarikrai bordering Kamrup and Naugong. I mean, Hima Khyrim is one of the largest in terms of size among the Khasi states. So I think that answer your question, Bandri, Iban, that, you know, Hima Khyrim is very inclusive in character. The king embraces everyone. Like you saw in Wanphrang's film, that a representative of one of the Raj, he did mention Moses in his, while doing the Bujai Blang. And also, he quoted a line from the Bible, "Thou shalt serve the Lord and God." Theology we can debate, but this shows the character of Hima Khyrim, which I also believe that in other Hima Khasi also, they are quite open. Of course, there are issues. If you read the journals and records of churches, there are issues which, when Christianity encountered with the traditional beliefs, and there are records in our assembly also that, there was a question of Kensang, there was a question of, when the Kur, they wanted to take back the land which belonged to the children of the father, because the Kur, the Mekha or the Kha, they were still, adherents of the traditional faith. Those are issues which can be resolved. So yes, but like this film which Wanphrang had made, it also has to provoke us or make us think that, as a minuscule community, tribal community, we have to be very worried, especially this day and age, from the threats from outside. I mean, there are, we are being surrounded by a majoritarian group, and especially now they were so aggressive in that sense. So we have to be very worried of ourselves. So I think we have to, rediscover the inclusiveness of Hima Khyrim and the Khasi community. Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor. Like you said, we can still talk a lot about this. I'll come to Kongpat. Kongpat, I believe you have a lot to say about this film. And as someone who has written extensively about the Khasi society, how do you see this film shape our understanding of identity and our sense of belongingness?
At the outset, I think I am very confused about my own identity, okay, because I'm always questioned. My loyalties are questioned, so I'm neither here nor there, maybe a bad person to be chosen to be here on this panel. The other point I wish to make is I'm very much against this word king, because the Khasis did not have the notion of kingship. We had chieftains, and I wish we could dig deeper into how we appointed the same. How did we arrive at a decision for the need to appoint a same? And who gave the sames that status of king? It was the British, because they didn't want to sort of negotiate. The British were the ones who commodified land. We never knew that land could be bought and sold, and they didn't want to negotiate with too many people, so they lifted this king, or this person, to the status of a king, and that was it, you know. Negotiating with one person is always easy. Then I'm also wondering why only Hima Khyrim is given so much prominence. What about Hima Malim? And Hima Malim is the Hima that adjoins a lot of these troubled spots. But incidentally, Hima Malim does not have an annual dance. I'm not sure why. Maybe we need to dig up a little more about that. And the Welsh apology, the apology of that Welsh missionary, was it spontaneous, or was it because you demanded something?
You know, I didn't plonk a camera in front of her and say, you know, we spent an entire afternoon talking about things, you know. And I explained to her where I was coming from. I explained to her what the purpose of the film was. And we had this long discourse. And I said what I needed to say. And then I could see that, you know, she was troubled. But as I've said in my previous interviews, her apologizing to the Khasi people should not be misconstrued as a victory. It is perhaps a moment in time for us where we are also given the liberty and the freedom to write our own histories, you know. So it wasn't like, you know, I didn't go parading around, but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, Dolly Kikon comes to mind, you know, in Nagaland, where she's said, all right, you know, the British government needs to return the museums need to return some of these artifacts that belong to the Naga, because these are living materials of the people. So
in any case, they are all stolen, like. The British Museum is full of stolen materials. So.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing to say, please, before you end.
I think Nan Powell was not the only person who had apologized to the Khasi society. I think when Hipshon Roy and Babu Onmori, when they went to attend the IARF conference in Holland in 1981, the Welsh people, they regretted, and they asked, you know, they told Maori and Hipshon that we were sorry that, you know, what our countrymen did to your region. But the best thing is that, you know, when Bahimshan, it's recorded, he wrote back and he said, okay, that was the past, and let us move on forward from where we, you know, we met in Holland. So, I mean, it's very interesting. It's noted, you can find in the magazine, in the journal edited by Bahip in the Kasneng Khasi in 1981.
Iban, I have to say one more thing, which is I'm quite surprised at Mohan Bhagwat being given the red carpet here and saying that everyone who is in Bharat is a Hindu. That makes me even more confused. I'm not sure what we are really as a people.
Yes, I'll come to Kong Meba. We can still debate on that, Kong. Kong Meba, we've seen the film, Blood and Border. You've also seen, like, one of the Lingdos. He mentioned how, you know, most of our land has been encroached upon by people from Assam or Bangladesh. How do you see, because we know that in the ancient time, there's no Komikong, There's no sense of ong banyak thiet cakal and dia ong banyak kami kata cakal ketika cakarat. How do you see that turn out today, ma'am?
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, at the outset, I'd like to thank Wanphrang for coming up with this beautiful film. And you'll be surprised that the first people I would like them to watch this will be my own cousins, my own relatives, especially from the paternal side. Why I'm saying that is because they don't know what is Shat Nong Krem. They don't know what is Pomblang dance. So you can understand why it's like that. Okay? You can, I think it's understood. So most of them, they don't know. They've never been to Smith also, because they're all Christians. So I think they'll be the first ones to watch this movie, this film. Yeah.
I like the fact that I have to go and give your family member my film.
Exactly.
Because it's very detailed, the rituals of the Hima Khyrim.
Yeah.
At least start having a dialogue, let's start having conversations.
Yes.
Exactly. You see, because I'm here by virtue of being a resident of that place. So and I can see some of my relatives here also, which adds more meaning to this event. And you see, when you talk about, I take, as someone being born from that place, my mother's from that place. And when I was watching this film today, it took my mind, my thoughts to 40 years plus back. Why I'm saying that is because I grew up in an environment where, two environments. One was a Christian environment, that is from my paternal side, my father's side, and a non-Christian environment, which is my grandmother's side. And there was a huge conflict in my mind. Okay, it's like, and what Wanphrang was just mentioning just now, that he was so scared when he went to Shat waking. So for me also, when I go to Pomblang to witness the Pomblang, okay, it's like sometimes I get scared because maybe someone will go and complain, okay, and tell the trauma, yeah. So now when you talk about how, you see the importance of the identity of this aimship at Smith, let's say now, okay, because whenever we talk about that, we relate it to Smith village. Let us not forget that because I belong to the right Nongbri, and one of my nephews is here, so correct me that we were the ones who had given space to this royal family, okay, when they had they had to fled from Nongkrem and come to Smith, okay, and we had to give them a place, and the Yingsat, where it is now, it's the space where the right Nongbri had given space to the royal family to, it's like a hideout. Okay, to a place for them to reside over there. So on that line, for us, the importance of land is so important because we gave someone a place to live, we gave someone to identify themselves, and which today, as members of the Khasi society, we take pride. Okay, and I, as a member of the right Nongkrem, I take even more greater pride because we are the ones who had embraced them to come from Nongkrem to Smith and give them the place. Okay, yes, the Smith village is there, and it is called, Smith village is called as it's like a place like a Rebam's aim. Okay, so people who live in Smith were supposed to be residing there so that they'll be like friends or they'll be neighbors of the royal family. So in that context, land to us is so important. Okay, so if you're talking about the body issues, and that's a totally different issue, I think, to talk about.
Yeah,
if you're going to base it on this film.
Yes, so I'll come back to identity because I can relate to what Wanphrang said and what you said about, being raised in a family, like a mixed family where one side is,
Exactly.
follows the indigenous faith while the other side Christian. So I know that most of us are always confused when people ask us, how would you define a Khasi? Is it language? Is it your culture? Is it your religion? So this is a question that has been, most young people ask nowadays. So with that, I would just like to throw the discussion open to the audience to ask your question. And please ask them hard questions, please.
Just out of curiosity, how do they, the particular ritual, which period of the year does it happen and how do they choose the date? I mean, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's most probably in the month of November.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it like the moon, they reveal the moon or the sun, or how do they arrive at the date? Is it something to do with the nature?
I mean, it's a lunar calendar. Banai and Khasi is the moon. So, and then it also has to correlate itself on certain market days. So, particular market days will be attributed to one particular ritual. I must also admit that there's so much more there that has to be understood, and I've just pretty much just scratched the surface. There, and I think that I urge other young researchers and scholars and filmmakers and sociologists, anthropologists to also look into this not merely from the sake of this exotic idea, or these noble savages or savage noble tropes, but to look at the relevance of these non-codified laws in contemporary India, But yes, like I said, I managed to have access to some of that information. And then after a point of time, when you do a non-fiction film, you also tell yourself, all right, this is it, because you can just keep on adding more and more and more and more. And then you also have to move on to other subject matters. And for me, I felt this should be sufficient to start igniting young minds, to start furthering other difficult questions.
I come from Assam, a place called Jorhat, and thanks to my friend Shashi, I could watch this film. I'm just very curious about the documentation because I worked as a conservator in Majuli, which is a river island. And one fine day in the evening, I listened to a hymn which seems very similar to the Buddhist hymns in Tibet. Right. And I was very curious because none of the Vaishnavite scholars had actually mentioned the inspiration or the influence. And probably because of the fact that they do not want to acknowledge the Buddhist influence in the Assamese Vaishnavite culture. But also I realized that so this documentation has been done. Even when it's written from a very partition point of view. And I'm just very curious about the documentation part. How has been the documentation? Because the information I've realized is very strictly guarded. I've just seen one clip. How has been documentation so far, besides the visual documentation? Has there been any written documentation of the hymns, of the music, or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the music is concerned, there have been, actually the musicians are here, Skem and Hep, Yang. So one of the musicians, Yang says, so no, this film would have not been possible without their support, and then of course, and Banshan as well, Kim, who also interestingly, during the course of filming, I discovered that he was from Balang Catholic, and I was like, okay, God, like there's another, but these were oral forms. But there have been attempts by other scholars from Northeastern Hill University to write it in. Forgive me, I forget, but they've been awarded by the Sangeet Natak Academy. So, but keep in mind that these are folk forms. I forget the name. It'll come to me perhaps at some point of time. But these were folk rhythms that have been passed down from one generation to another. And if you want to ask that question, these would be the best guys to talk to, because they live that reality. I happen to be there at a point of time as a creative person to document this one moment of time. But these guys are the guys that you perhaps would have a better, more nuanced conversation. Apart from documentation of the music, the other rituals, what I like about this whole thing is that there is an attempt to not want to disclose it to everyone, especially in this day of era where everything has to be nomenclature. There's this perpetual seeking to be in the archive, and I like this almost anti-archive approach, unconsciously, of course, that this ritual has. They're like, it's all right, it's okay, we don't. And they were very reluctant to be filmed, to be interviewed, etc. But I perpetually sort of went there over and over and explained what my position was. So, and I think that it's also all right, because sometimes when things become too easily accessible, you take it for granted. But I must admit that because it was so difficult to access this information, it meant that I've learned so much more. There wasn't, of course, there are papers being written, there are articles being written out there online. and you could look them up and research them on the internet. But a lot of that information has just been shared, by people out there because they felt close and they wanted, this ritual and this practice to be also known everywhere else, but not only at the level of just quote-unquote a ritual. What are the implications of all of these things in contemporary India, post-colonial, or for that matter, let's even complicate it even further, the existence of the colonial in the post-colonial, So,
But Wanphrang, correct me if I'm wrong, in the movie, in the film, I saw, if I'm not mistaken, I saw that, yes, the rituals, the beats, the rhythms, it was mentioned there that Kapasanteo had created them. And it was also mentioned that these rhythms and these beats were never archived or were never written, but it was memorized by the Dualia. So, Katukapat, is it true? Kadai shisha ba kat kum ke bangai iha kani ka film kalong ba kini ki jing kani ka sur ka tem ka put ya ka sing nei but ya kini ki ka tangmuri ba ka sing ro ka beat te ki kimdon ki jing tho andai pishu ya kan ma andai di ba yo pateng di kimdon kinu ki kinja ban ong banda tho banda bo jing tho ban sa ai pa de ki khon ki ti hadin habot kadi bi ki bo ba da long ki bo jing kan mau ken
Kumpulong na marang ngi ya idai ki junior musician na marang tay ki don saungot ki head musician. Ban ngi long kum kinong yarap. Bat kum ngi sheming la don tay khalai snem. Kam don kataka ba ji shutho amot ko dei ba isu ki hikai bai ma shi shwa ka laniam shibanai idholia ki rung dolia ha jing sat. Bat hang tu ki hikai bro shibanai. Bat shwa ka tu laniam dei ban bakla. Manusia pek bedik man is ngap dik skor. But kung piong menegar pa asentiu, naman ang tugi ang kumeneng yo iba, de pa asentiu ko bihikai. To maybe let's say klaban day, but just the basic things. Nei ka pa asentiu su tap tang di kejat tak. Nei ki brio kadon kasam. Those who have got the talents, maybe they can create it. Let's say haba kishna lang bat. Lang baka kikinong rim per. Let's see, nadu kipor manshwa habikile kinugunu kile lang bat kini kejutang lo. Hang ni kanang scam. But kumulong mantawle you called religious. Bio iya ka flame ba Wanphrang dengan congratulation ba Wanphrang. Mar ba de hang ni kelong purely religious. Hadu mantahi ba hang te kidan sipok sing arpinyosken. But kitu hi katukan ik ba Wanphrang la pani tu.
Before I get into my question to the filmmaker, just to answer that question of yours, I think Kong Lapinshai's aim, she had written a book called The Classicalism of the Khasi Music, where there's an attempt also to notate the Shiphok Sing and Arpunyo skit, the Indian classical scale. Yeah. So there was an attempt. Not the Smiths, the Indian classical scale. So if you check that book, you will see. And then secondly, that question that Kong Patricia asked earlier, no? Why, there's no annual dance of the Malayam. This is because I had done a research also on this. That's why I know. It's not because of anything else. My PhD is on the Yengsat, that's why. So the reason is because Hima Shillong earlier was just one. The Britishers came and then they divided. They put in seat of discord and all that. So if I'm not mistaken, in 1838, it was divided into Hima Khyrim and Hima Malayam. And then when it was divided, in that family meeting, because both, even the Hima Malayam members also were part of lineage of Pasanthiu. So it was decided in that meeting that, the Khyrim will be custodian of the rites and the rituals, whereas the Hima Malayam will get property and land. And that is why the Yodo goes to the Hima Malayam. And yes, in Hima Khyrim, the lineage is from the eldest daughter, not from the youngest. The same side is always the firstborn daughter. So it's not the Khado. And Wanphrang, this question is to you. I notice, because of the deity we have Sutnyao Thaulang, and one more, I don't remember, but the Sutnya is supposed to be a representative of the maternal uncle. Thaulang is of the father. You had one shot in that film after the Pombelang, you know, not the dance, where you had a cutaway of Kongor Diengdoh, right? So my question is, was that accidental or random or intentional? Because he's a Thaulang. Kongor Diengdoh is a Thaulang. So in today's age, there's an entire debate that the Khasi father is not as that responsible because Umyo Kajat. You know, so therefore, you know, he's all that excuse. So is that a political statement? Because in the rituals, you notice the Thaulang, Kongor Diengdoh does not play a role. It's, you know, the same and the same side. She prepares the ritual and the same is the one who performs. So are you trying to question the role of the Thaulang or what is? And you had just one shot, that is also a low angle shot of the Thaulang. You know, just a cutaway of that.
Yeah. So, you know, thankfully, I'm not writing an exam in the college anymore. Because you know, you also sort of pander to whoever gives you marks, no? So, but I understand the question, but sometimes, you know, when you're editing or when you're creating film or music, I think it's also important that you know, you are not perpetually trying to make meaning. You know, yes, there is a conscious attempt to create meaning, but sometimes one shouldn't burden themselves too much with this creating meaning, you know, because one would just sit down and look at a tree and start, you know, getting postmodernist about things, so to say. Why did I put his face? He's got a very interesting face here. I think he's got a very interesting face. Don't you think so? No. And as someone who's doing film and photography, you know, you're also looking for interesting people to look at. I mean, for example, the other shot was of that person that, you know, was blowing smoke, you know, and I'm like, yeah, but, you know, I like that shot. Now, why will I, now, if you ask me, like, you know, why will I like that shot? I don't know, you know, and I'm humble enough to say I don't know, but now that you've mentioned it, because you also come from, you know, a film background, so you're obviously creating meaning by aligning shots together, and that's also one way to read a film. But after you've made a film or a piece of music or art, after it has left your hands, it is no longer yours, you know, and people will interpret it in the way and manner that they interpret it, and unless it's supposed to be, unless it's supposed to be a propaganda film, where meaning making is so restricted, or rather the idea of creating meaning is to brainwash people to do terrible things, then yes. But for me, it's not that. Let's have a conversation. Let's have, you know, let's not take ourselves too seriously, especially about these things that are so and so, quote unquote, define who we are. We don't know who we are. Let's just admit it, you know. And whoever says that they know who they are, speaking out of their rear ends, you know. So.
I'm glad that you did it randomly. Otherwise, you
I'm
glad for the aesthetic of it. Yeah.
He's got an interesting face. Why would I deny it? Yeah.
Okay, we have time only for one more question before we. Yes.
Yeah, this is for Wanphrang. I mean, taking a cue from your teachers. Why is it that? Why did it take you 30? I mean, when I was watching this movie, I mean, the first 30 minutes was a National Geographic sort of a documentary, you know, and then suddenly after 30 minutes, you got into the thick of things, into that part where you brought in Christianity bit, and then you went back again to normal documentary, and then again you brought in the Christian bit and then the Hindu bit. Are you doing that on purpose, or is it just ridiculous, or what? That's one question. Second question is regarding the Thaulang to Diengdoh. If you know that it's the Diengdoh, it's strange. I mean, that shot was random, as you said. But for you to know it's always the Diengdoh, seriously. Right from Paye Mado Untaro, by default, it's always the Diengdoh of Kika. And the other one is for Pastor when you mention about the fact that this Khyrim's aimship is a very inclusive, I would also, this is for maybe debatable, but I would also say that among all the tribes in the Northeast, I think Sumangi Khasi has been the most inclusive tribes, whereby through trade and commerce and the things of that, we have been having this relationship since a very long time. To the point in we have the priestess land. So I think so this is the inclusivity part of the Khyrim is not only to Khyrim's aimship per se, but really getting, and that's why this thing about like identity. Number one, they have always been the outsiders, if you say, has always been part of us, this amalgamation of our culture.
We'll break it half and half just to be democratic. We can talk about the first question outside because, the second thing about Diengdoh also we'll talk about it outside. The inclusivity thing, perhaps, you can elaborate on that. But I just wanted to leave with one parting note, and that is in relation to and I was filming, and this man went on to quote Moses, and I was like, okay, right, wow, okay, how do I deal with this now, and then, I tried to ask this question, how do you accommodate this, etc., etc. There were no clear answers, but then in the back of my head, I'm telling myself, if this goat is being denied or not accepted on account of the fact that this particular individual is from a Catholic or a Presbyterian denomination, the Hima Khyrim stands out to lose out on its land, So it's fine if you want it to be just a kind of a W or a museum piece, but these things have long-lasting implications with regards to land, and the one thing that really defines who we are is our relationship with the land. And for me, when I was listening to the previous Lingdoh for me, you don't know Lingdoh for me, you want? Please, Lingdoh for me, I mean that like that humility, like sat down right at the back, ma, the young long pilong, For me, that for me was Khasi poetry, the bone and marrow of Khasi poetry, and it just gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. And haki ding, haki ma, haki sla, kabor jeng got kan clip no. I mean, it's just I mean, that is Khasi theology without wanting to be Khasi theology, So, but at the same time, and even yesterday as well, he sent me a very beautiful link. And the entire process, which is so humble, like, okay, we acknowledge that we are part of the of Hima Khyrim, and this is what we can offer. And in the process of us offering, these are our issues and these are the problems that we encounter. So, amidst all of this, and this is when I'm going to tickle the gender people, us'im ukmi, the mother will always embrace you, irrespective of whether the child is problematic or not. Us'im ukmi. And for me, that just paraphrases the beauty of where I come from. On that note,
Very briefly, I'll come to Ivan's question. I believe that inclusiveness is part of our DNA. And also that will answer Kongpat's question, who is a king in Khasi? I mean, there's no equivalent, English equivalent for aim. But if you read Barkin Farm's critical appraisal of the investiture ceremony of the current aim of Hima Khyrim in 1978, he said that very bluntly, that he said, among the Khasis, aim is selected from a transient resident or someone who no longer have kur, a kurless person. And even Khasis went beyond the borders to just pick up a Hindu, a Muslim, and make a king of the Hima. Because the king or the CM is not a ruler in Hima Khasi. He is being ruled by the Hima is being ruled by the Bakrao or the Batri, whoever, are part of the king in council, part of the council of ministers, which we call Bakrao and Batri. Of course, this is also another thing that we have to debate, because like in Hima Shillong and Hima Malim, where it also covers the entire Shillong city. So Shillong city is being inhabited by people like me who come from Sominting, and some other people who came from Thangbuli and from Nongstoin, Pendeng Rai. So they became permanent resident of this place. So the question is, are we part of this Hima? Can we vote or can we select a Mintri? Or it's, gospel, it's the end of the day, that it's the end of the road that, Mintri should always belong to that particular clan. Whereas people who are, also residents of this place, can be, whether is it allowed for us, to be part of this, system of, selecting a Mintri or a same?
Can I say one thing, please?
Yes, go on.
About that prayer by Ep-9 Diengdoh. See, so much of what we do is oral tradition. I think it's time to record all that, because it sounds so good, actually. It comes from the heart. So we need to document a lot about ourselves. Otherwise, somebody else writes for us. If we don't write about ourselves, somebody else will write and describe us the way they want.
True.
And also, Judge Mukim, because we are Maushai, we are called Maushai, we are one of the clans that give a goat to the Hima Khyrim every time they have Shat Nongkrem.
I promise this is the last point. Yeah, and I myself will walk out. When we were doing the research for the film, up until the 1970s, and this is for the gentleman from Assam as well, the Tiwa chieftains were still offering the goat to Hima Khyrim, but post-statehood, he stopped. So I asked him, I said, why is it that this has stopped? Do you see yourself wanting to present this goat? Because in a classic act of semiotics, it is also representative of a larger political understanding of how ST communities, indigenous communities want to reimagine themselves in contemporary India. So I don't know whether now from those chieftains in that adjoining area, Jagirod, Kitiksi Imtiwa and all that, have been giving goats, but they're more than willing to be part of this. And therein lies the beauty, because upon doing so, the Khyrim kingdom can also assert itself and say, yes, this land is still ours, That's it. Done.
Thank you. Yes, because of paucity of time.
Can I just add something?
Yes.
It's actually it's an experience that I just had recently, because I have these young nieces and nephews at home. So whenever it's on oral traditions that we're talking about, Pat, and whenever they play outside, I keep on saying, the Toda War. Okay? So to my siblings, they keep on saying, what do you mean by saying the Toda War? That remained in my mind. And the reason is because from the 4 siblings that were at home, I was one of the 4 who, in most of my winters, I go to my village, in Wanphrang village, and I stay with my grandmother, and whose main source of occupation was brewing liquor. Okay? So I've seen a lot of that whole process over there. Exactly. Okay, the liquor that supplies true, yeah. So I used to remember my grandmother, while doing that whole process of brewing liquor, she will, it's like a dual role. At the same time, she'll talk to me and she'll say, remember these things, keep this in your head, remember it. Till you grow old, you should remember these things, okay? So one of those things that she taught me, okay, which is part of oral tradition, was this, that how the war means you should have eyes all over your head. Be careful, Okay? So these things are so important. I think we have to revive those things again, okay? I think this is one awakening to us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kong. Yes, because of paucity of time, I'm just gonna let all our panelists to give your ending remark. We'll start with Kong Pat.
I'd like to say that it's very important to read, and one book I would recommend is called The Welsh Presbyterian Missionaries, written by Andrew May. When you talk to Andrew, he says the Presbyterians haven't read this book, otherwise they wouldn't allow me to come back to Shillong. You know? Because he writes all the truth there. And I think it's important for us to read that book and know more about ourselves, because he is the grandnephew of Thomas Jones.
No,
Great, yeah. Oh, great, yeah.
Your ending remark, ma'am.
Okay, while watching this film, I was touched by the last remarks of Nance, Pastor Nance, the Gen Secretary, yeah, that we should feel sorry, which we should be sorry for. You know, when I've been, for a long time I've been debating on this issue of Christian interface into the Khasi culture. And what are the areas that we should revisit? Now, as a sociologist, it is my dream that we should do some workshops on revisiting tribal culture, okay, which is so important. And when I saw this film, I think there was a lot of assimilation and acculturation happening during the missionaries' time. So I don't know, Kong Pat, whether you'd agree with me or not. It's like certain areas of our culture has been tarnished by our Christian ethics and beliefs. And many a times I used to ask my mother, why didn't you encourage your mother to be a Christian? So she used to tell me that my mother used to ask me, what is something that you'll give me, something which is new? So my mother used to talk about she talked about the commandments. So in Khasi we say the hukum. So in the hukum, amongst the Khasis, they talk about knowing God, the fear of God, then righteousness. It talks about how to live a good individual, good person, and how to treat everyone equally. So my grandmother will say, there's nothing new in what you're telling me. So which is why it was so difficult for my mom to talk to my mother about Christianity. What is one thing that I don't have that you have? So later on in life, I was thinking maybe if we're given a platform to talk about how Jesus can be the mediator, okay, between heaven and earth, maybe that time it would have been an answer to them, or to the confusion that they had with the coming of Christianity. So I think this should not be the end, Wanphrang. I think this should be the first part of the movie, and then we can continue the second part that is more on the Christian interface. Yeah. Thanks.
Wanphrang, your ending remark.
I've already said my last words, but I take this opportunity to thank St. Anthony's College for this excellent opportunity to bring everyone together and have this really important conversation. I think that this college has been absolutely instrumental with regards to the media landscape, not only in the Northeast, but the rest of the country. So thank you once again, St. Anthony's College, Mass Media Department, the Media Club, and the students. Yeah.
Yes.
There are also other people here. There are also other people here who have made this film a possibility. One of them is, of course, my assistant camera person, Embor Sayu. Where's Embor? Embor, yeah. And we would direct each other from one place to another, because most of the time I wasn't here and I was like sending him these instructions, and it was a beautiful working relationship, and just thoroughly touched by the calmness and the genuine desire to learn more, And I had a great experience. Gordon, if Gordon is here, Gordon, all the aerial photography that you saw in the film. And of course, all of these people have been made possible through the introduction of Tyrell, who also runs the Hills People. Please stand up, Tyrell. Tyrell runs a filmmaking center in the state. He runs a filmmaking center in the state. I have a lot of arguments with Tyrell, but why not? And then, of course, the people who've made this film possible. This film has also been made possible to the support of the Meghalayan Age Limited. I'm very grateful. Once again, thank you, Ki Duhalia, Jongka Yingsat, Wapipidiang Yangao, for your acceptance, for giving me this opportunity to learn so much more and tell myself that there is so much more that I need to learn in this world, and reminding myself that, there is no end to knowledge and wisdom. To remind myself to stay humble and to always want to look at the world like a child, childlike, not childish. Thank you so much. Similarly, Kilingdo, Joga, Ying Sad, Gibal Isla, Ruinga, but you don't know the cat when you merging with Bansutu, come Jana Shushu, Shapang Imlang Salang Juni, Namalada de Mangim to Yakamenta, Kalaway Rukashong Sir, Blishibun. And then, of course, without, I don't even know where to begin, but Naying Saad, who Kibal Islat yang ban sutu kam jilu shu shpang kinyam kirukom karti dustur khasi badru kibal pen sutu yang badon kam ban long kum tau kan jau si mukmi ban pediang lut mde ban kentat mde ban penyapharya namar ngilong ki imlang salang kabarit ba balada stang matmu pen pharya ngi em ki imlang salang kabasir tikubli shibun mama arun aku disebut bakah hapapan, but kumjuru ya Inyas Imsat. And last but not the least, my family, my mother. And for accommodating all of my shenanigans. I mean, when we were doing Mascom, we didn't have role models to look up to, We couldn't say, I wanted to do films so that I could be like so and so. There was no one in town, and middle class society ridden with the anxieties wanted me to do the kind of career choices that were known to everyone. But I think that, all those arguments were fruitful. And also it's a very emotional moment because I remember when I first made Where the Clouds End and I watched it with my father, Bam Kwai. And at the end of the screening, it was just, this cataclysmic debate of epic proportions. And then by the time we watched, because we did not choose, he was slowly starting to understand and fathom that this came from a place of empathy and love, And this was the last film that we watched together, so, yeah, Kublepa. Thank you very much, yeah.
Thank you, Wanphrang. Pastor, ending remark.
Should I give a benediction or a comment? Okay, a quick comment at the end. Since I'm a friend of Wanphrang, I was getting access to the film since the rough cut. So let me make a confession that since that time I was awestruck by the powerful prayer of Diengdoh. To me, I consider it's a political prayer. And if you watch closely, or you listen closely to the words of the prayer, kakot kala klip yakasla, typical Smith or Nongkrem language, dialect, kakot, the book had trampled the leaves. I was, crystallizing in my mind that what does he mean? So my political interpretation of it, so it took me back to the, now we are within the Indian Union. So is it the constitution? because our Hima predate India, predate Bharat. Now we have a Bharat constitution. So it also reminded me in 1959, because there was a debate, a hot debate, when the district council passed the law which is called succession of chief, appointment of chief and succession of headman Act 1959. That act was passed deliberately to axe or to dethrone one of the sames at that point of time whom they were, political rivals. And there was a question during that time, if the sixth schedule is meant, whether the sixth schedule is meant to protect or to promote or to preserve our culture. Because when it comes to Hima Khyrim, the question arose whether the district council, the book, will also legislate which type of goat that the Hima Khyrim will offer to the Malaysian law. So this is a big question. Kila banle kumta. Entau daga ain ke bakumno, la bantau ain. Banong banadu mentaka sniam, pin ya le niam le rukom, pin ya ngo blay, ngo yu le silong, da ulang bertu, da ulang rong keti, long kata. So, kani hadu menta till date, I'm struggling with this question because it's still a debate. And lastly, Hima Khyrim, the rituals of Hima Khyrim, to me will remain a mystery. And let it remain. Because what we saw in this documentary is just a slice. I think Kong Ed will also share more after this program, because he had access to the Yeng Sat, Yeng Sunan, because the rituals which were happening inside the Yeng Sat, Yeng Sunan, I mean, it's not open to the outside world. So whether, I would like to ask Wanphrang also, but you don't have to answer, whether whatever we have shown here, is it a reflection of the, the rituals which were happening inside the Yeng Sat, Yeng Sunan, Yeng Blay? I doubt. So with these words, thank you so much. Kublay siya jarngo, ublay nang kerku, ya gajaj bendri gujongi, nginang imsuk, impalay, nginya buram kelyang, iwe kublay.
That was an interesting perspective from Pastor Christopher Purto. And yes, I like what you said, that the rituals of Hima Khyrim is a mystery and it will remain a mystery. So what we've heard from our panelists today reminds us that identity is never simple. It will often be contested, it is evolving. And films like Blood and Water, it gives us the opportunity to ask these necessary questions, these difficult but necessary questions. So with that, I would, on behalf of the organizers, I would once again like to thank each and every one of you for, being such a wonderful audience and for asking questions, for engaging. And I do hope that, this discussion that we have, it will spark further dialogues even beyond this hall. So thank you so much. Kublai Shubun.